June 18, 1943, Camp Hearne, Texas. Obergefreiter Hans Müller crumpled the American newspaper in disgust and threw it against the barracks wall. The headlines screamed impossible numbers. Ford's Willow Run plant producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. Liberty ships rolling off shipyard ways faster than German U-boats could sink them. Aircraft factories operating around the clock with production totals that exceeded the entire Luftwaffe's inventory. American propaganda, Müller spat to his fellow prisoners from the 21st Panzer Division. The same lies they had been told since arriving at this Texas prison camp 2 months earlier. No nation could sustain such industrial output while fighting a war on two fronts. The numbers were mathematically impossible. The Americans were trying to break German morale with fantasies of limitless production. What Müller did not know was that within 72 hours, he and 200 other German prisoners of war would board a work transport to witness American industrial capacity firsthand. They would see production lines that operated with clockwork precision, factories that consumed more electricity than entire German cities, and a level of mechanized efficiency that would shatter every assumption about American weakness they had carried since their capture in North Africa. The psychological demolition of Nazi ideology was about to begin, not through propaganda or re-education programs, but through the overwhelming evidence of what democratic capitalism could achieve when fully mobilized for war. These hardened Wehrmacht veterans, who had dismissed American soldiers as soft and American industry as inefficient, were about to discover that they had challenged the most powerful industrial force in human history. The transformation would prove more devastating to Nazi beliefs than any military defeat. For in the factories and farms of wartime America, German prisoners would witness something their leaders had told them was impossible. A free society outproducing, outbuilding, and overwhelming the totalitarian war machine they had served. The arsenal of democracy was real, and it was magnificent beyond their comprehension. Müller had arrived at Camp Hearne as a true believer in German superiority. Captured during the final collapse of Army Group Africa at Cap Bon, Tunisia, he had been a veteran of 2 years of desert warfare. His Panzer Regiment 5 had rolled across France in 1940, pushed deep into Russia in 1941, and fought British Empire forces to a standstill in the Western Desert until American industrial weight tilted the balance. He wore his Iron Cross second class with pride, a decoration earned during the Siege of Tobruk when German panzers still seemed invincible. The journey to America had been his first hint that Nazi propaganda might not reflect reality. The Liberty ship SS Robert E. Perry that carried him and 3,000 other prisoners across the Atlantic was itself a monument to American industrial capacity. Built in just 4 days at Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, the vessel represented mass production techniques that Germany had never achieved. The ship's crew disposed of more food waste daily than Müller's entire company had received in weekly rations during the final months in Africa. But Müller and his comrades had dismissed this abundance as temporary propaganda. The Americans were trying to impress them, they reasoned. No nation could sustain such lavish treatment of prisoners while fighting a global war. The real America, they believed, lay behind the facade. A nation of mongrel races led by Jewish financiers, incapable of the industrial discipline that only pure Germanic peoples could achieve. That delusion began to crack on arrival at Norfolk Naval Base. The docks stretched for miles, handling more tonnage in a single day than Hamburg managed in a week. Cranes moved with electric precision, loading and unloading dozens of ships simultaneously. The parking lots overflowed with automobiles belonging to dock workers. In Germany, private car ownership remained a privilege of the party elite. Here, ordinary laborers drove to work in their own vehicles. The train journey from Norfolk to Texas provided the next level of cognitive dissonance. Not cattle cars, but passenger coaches with padded seats and dining service. The prisoners pressed their faces against windows, witnessing an America that contradicted everything they had been told. Every small town blazed with electric illumination. Factories ran night shifts, their windows glowing, parking lots full even at midnight. The casual waste was staggering. American railway workers threw away half-finished cigarettes worth a week's German wages. Near Louisville, the train slowed as it passed a synthetic rubber plant that stretched for 3 miles along the river. for massive facilities, each employing thousands of workers, producing 800,000 tons of synthetic rubber annually. Germany, despite inventing the process, had never managed more than 120,000 tons in its best year. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, a chemist from IG Farben before his conscription, understood the implications immediately. This single complex outproduced the entire German chemical industry. At Camp Hearne, the systematic demolition of Nazi mythology continued. The camp had been built in 4 months, housing 4,800 prisoners in conditions that exceeded what most had known as civilians. Wooden barracks with electric lights, flush toilets, hot showers, and steam heat. Each building constructed with more lumber than entire German villages possessed. The camp hospital astounded medical personnel among the prisoners. X-ray machines, surgical equipment, pharmaceutical supplies that had been unavailable in Germany since 1941. All standard provision for enemy prisoners. Dr. Friedrich Brenner, former chief surgeon of the 164th Light Division, found himself in a facility better equipped than most German civilian hospitals. The Americans had penicillin, the miracle drug German physicians had only heard rumors about. They used it freely even on prisoners with minor infections. German soldiers were dying for want of basic sulfa drugs, and the Americans were giving their most advanced medicine to captured enemies without hesitation. The camp kitchen became another classroom in American prosperity. Prisoners assigned to cooking duties discovered walk-in refrigerators, electric mixers, automated dishwashers, and gas ranges that could prepare meals for 5,000 men. The daily ration included fresh milk, eggs, meat, vegetables, and white bread, quantities that German civilians had not seen since 1939. Feldwebel Otto Krebs, a former hotel chef from Munich, wept as he threw perfectly good bread into garbage cans. American regulations required preparing 10% more food than needed to ensure every prisoner received full rations. The surplus was discarded rather than risk shortages. Müller had initially explained away this abundance as an attempt to soften German resistance. The Americans were trying to buy their loyalty with comfortable conditions. But as weeks passed, the evidence accumulated beyond dismissal. This was not propaganda. This was simply how America functioned. The abundance was not exceptional, it was routine. The decisive moment came on July 15, 1943, when Camp Hearne received authorization to use prisoner labor for agricultural work. A critical manpower shortage in Texas cotton fields had forced authorities to deploy POWs despite Geneva Convention concerns. The decision, driven by necessity, would prove more destructive to Nazi ideology than any re-education program. Groups of 50 prisoners were trucked daily to work sites across Robertson County, traveling through the American heartland without blindfolds or restricted routes. They saw everything: the endless fields of corn and cotton, the farmhouses with electric lights in every room, the automobiles in every driveway, the mechanized agriculture that operated on a scale unimaginable in Europe. At the Morrison cotton gin outside Hearne, Müller watched a single machine process more cotton in 1 hour than his entire Bavarian village could have handled in a month using traditional methods. The gin was powered by electricity from the Brazos River Authority, part of a rural electrification program that had brought power to 90% of Texas farms by 1943. The farmer who owned the gin was nobody special. Not aristocracy, not a party member, just a farmer. Yet he had electricity, running water, a truck, a car, and a tractor. His workers, including the Negro field hands, ate lunch from boxes containing more food than German workers received in a week. Heinrich Bauer, a former agricultural engineer from Pomerania, calculated that the farm equipment he witnessed represented more mechanization than all of East Prussia combined. A single John Deere combine harvester could do the work of 100 men. The fields stretched to the horizon, each one larger than entire German counties. The farmers spoke casually of yields that would have been fantasy in Germany. 60 bushels of wheat per acre compared to Germany's 30 on the best land. The psychological impact was devastating. These prisoners had been raised on Nazi mythology about Germanic agricultural superiority and American decadence. They discovered instead that American farmers, using advanced machinery and scientific methods, achieved productivity levels that made German agriculture appear primitive. The racial theories that had justified European conquest crumbled in the face of mathematical reality. On August 3, 1943, 200 prisoners from Camp Hearne boarded transport trucks for extended work assignments at defense plants in Houston. The journey would complete their ideological destruction. What they witnessed in America's industrial heartland would transform Wehrmacht veterans into unwitting ambassadors for democracy. The convoy of prison transports rolled through Houston at dawn, past petrochemical complexes that operated around the clock. The prisoners could see distillation columns reaching toward the sky, catalytic crackers processing thousands of barrels daily, storage tanks that could hold more petroleum than Germany imported in a year. The refineries consumed electricity at rates that exceeded entire German cities. Steam and smoke rose from dozens of facilities, evidence of industrial activity beyond German comprehension. Müller found himself assigned to the Brown Shipbuilding Company, where Liberty ships and destroyer escorts rolled off the ways with mechanical precision. The shipyard employed 25,000 workers operating in 3 shifts. At peak production, they completed a Liberty ship every 8 days. The scale defied German experience. This single facility launched more tonnage monthly than all German shipyards combined. Stabsgefreiter Werner Schmidt, working in the welding department, watched American shipbuilders employ techniques that German engineers had never mastered. Automated welding machines, precision cutting tools, assembly methods that reduced construction time from months to weeks. The workers operated with casual efficiency, achieving production standards that would have been impossible in Germany even using slave labor. The most devastating revelation was the quality of American workers themselves. Nazi propaganda had portrayed Americans as lazy, undisciplined, corrupted by democracy and racial mixing. Instead, Müller discovered a workforce that combined technical skill with industrial discipline. Women operated complex machinery, Negroes supervised production lines, teenagers ran equipment worth more than German factories. The diversity that Nazis claimed would weaken America had instead created strength through the efficient utilization of all human resources. At lunchtime, the prisoners witnessed something that shattered their final illusions about American weakness. The shipyard cafeteria served hot meals to workers at subsidized prices. Roast beef, fried chicken, fresh vegetables, milk, coffee, ice cream. Quantities and quality that German officers had not enjoyed since before the war. The workers ate like kings while building ships that would sink German submarines. They threw away food that prisoners' families in Germany would have treasured. Obergefreiter Franz Kellner, assigned to the electrical department, watched technicians install radar systems in destroyer escorts. Equipment that German engineers had developed was now being mass-produced by Americans and installed with assembly line efficiency. The technology gap had closed and reversed. American radar was more advanced, more reliable, and manufactured in quantities that German industry could not match. The lunch break conversations provided another shock. American workers discussed overtime pay, vacation schedules, and labor union benefits. They complained about rationing while eating better than German civilians had before the war. They grumbled about gasoline restrictions while driving cars that most Europeans could never afford. Their complaints revealed a standard of living so elevated that temporary wartime inconveniences seemed catastrophic to people accustomed to abundance. Werner Schmidt struck up a conversation with an American welder named Joe Sullivan, an Irish immigrant's son from South Boston. Sullivan had left school at 16 to work in the shipyards, earning wages that exceeded a German engineer's salary. He owned a car, rented a 3-room apartment with indoor plumbing, and sent money home to support his widowed mother. His younger brother was serving with the Pacific Fleet. His sister worked at a defense plant in California. The entire family was contributing to the war effort while maintaining living standards that German workers could only dream of achieving. Sullivan showed Müller photographs of his neighborhood in South Boston. 3-story apartment buildings with electric lights in every window, automobiles parked along every street, children who looked well-fed and warmly dressed. This was not the American elite. This was working-class Boston, yet it displayed prosperity that exceeded middle-class German standards. The photographs contradicted everything Nazi ideology had taught about American social decay. That evening, back at Camp Hearne, Müller and his comrades struggled to process what they had witnessed. The American industrial capacity was not propaganda. It was overwhelming reality. A single shipyard outproduced the German Navy. A single chemical plant exceeded German synthetic rubber output. A single aircraft factory built more planes than the Luftwaffe manufactured in a year. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, the former IG Farben chemist, attempted to calculate American production totals based on what they had observed. If Houston alone contained dozens of such facilities, and Texas was just one of 48 states, the total American industrial capacity exceeded German estimates by orders of magnitude. No wonder the Wehrmacht was losing ground on every front. They were fighting an enemy with unlimited resources. Dr. Friedrich Brenner, the former surgeon, made the connection between American abundance and military effectiveness. Well-fed workers produced better weapons. Advanced machinery increased efficiency. Educated engineers designed superior equipment. Scientific research created technological advantages. The democratic system that Nazis claimed would weaken America had instead created conditions for maximum productivity. On August 15, 1943, the prisoners received their next assignment. Extended agricultural work in the Rio Grande Valley, where mechanized farming operated on a scale that dwarfed European agriculture. The psychological destruction would continue as they witnessed American food production systems that could feed the world while supporting a global war. The transport convoy rolled south through Texas farmland that stretched beyond the horizon. Mile after mile of cotton fields, each one larger than German estates, tended by mechanical cultivators that moved like ships across an ocean of white. The prisoners could see irrigation systems that brought water from distant rivers, transforming semi-arid land into productive agriculture. The engineering achievement exceeded anything they had witnessed in Germany. Near Harlingen, the convoy stopped at a cotton plantation that employed 500 seasonal workers during harvest season. Müller watched as mechanical cotton pickers moved through the fields, harvesting more in one day than 100 hand laborers could manage in a week. The machines operated with precision that demonstrated advanced engineering and manufacturing capabilities. Each picker represented technical sophistication beyond German agricultural equipment. Feldwebel Anton Weiss, who had worked his family's farm in Bavaria before conscription, calculated that this single plantation produced more cotton than all of southern Germany combined. The yields per acre exceeded anything possible with European methods. American agricultural science had created crop varieties, fertilizers, and cultivation techniques that revolutionized food production. The abundance that fed American cities and supplied Allied armies was not accidental. It was the product of systematic scientific advancement. The plantation owner, Samuel Richardson, was a third-generation farmer who had transformed his inheritance using modern methods. He spoke with casual confidence about yields, commodity prices, and government agricultural programs. His knowledge exceeded that of German agricultural scientists. He owned 15,000 acres, employed hundreds of workers, and operated equipment worth more than entire German villages. Yet he was not aristocracy or party elite. He was simply a successful American farmer. Richardson's house shocked the prisoners more than his fields. A two-story colonial structure with electric lights in every room, indoor plumbing, central heating, and a telephone connection to anywhere in America. The building displayed wealth that German nobles rarely achieved. The furnishings came from factories across America. The appliances represented technological advancement. The food stores contained abundance unimaginable to European civilians. Mrs. Richardson, the farmer's wife, prepared lunch for the work crews, including the German prisoners. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, and sweet tea. She served the meal on china plates with silver cutlery, treating enemy prisoners better than German officers ate. Her kindness was not calculated propaganda. It was simply how Americans treated people, even enemies. The generosity revealed confidence in ultimate victory and security in their power. The Richardsons' teenage son operated a tractor worth more than everything Müller's father had earned in his lifetime. When Müller mentioned this to the boy, he laughed and said it was not even a particularly good tractor. His father was waiting for a new model from John Deere that would be even better. The casual attitude toward expensive machinery revealed an economy of such abundance that constant upgrading was routine rather than exceptional. During harvest season, the prisoners lived in temporary quarters near the cotton gin and witnessed the full cycle of American agricultural production. Trucks arrived constantly with loads of cotton that were processed, baled, and shipped to textile mills across the country. The gin operated 24 hours a day, processing more cotton in 1 week than German mills received in a year. The scale of operations demonstrated organizational capabilities that exceeded German industrial management. The Negro workers at the gin earned wages that exceeded German factory salaries, despite their subordinate social status in Texas. They drove automobiles, lived in houses with electricity, and sent their children to schools. The racial hierarchy that Nazis claimed would destroy America had instead created a system where even the lowest classes enjoyed living standards superior to European workers. The contradiction challenged every assumption about racial superiority and national strength. Heinrich Bauer struck up conversations with Mexican-American farm workers who had come north for harvest season. They spoke of opportunities in American agriculture, wages that supported families, and dreams of buying their own land. Despite facing discrimination, they participated in an economy that offered advancement through hard work. The diversity that Nazis claimed would fragment America had instead created a dynamic workforce that contributed to national strength. On September 10, 1943, the prisoners received news that would complete their ideological transformation. Italy had surrendered to the Allies, removing Germany's primary European ally and opening another front in the Mediterranean. The announcement came as they witnessed American agricultural abundance that could feed the world while supporting a global war. The connection was unmistakable. American productivity had created the material basis for Allied victory. Dr. Brenner organized a discussion among the more educated prisoners to analyze what they had observed. The evidence was overwhelming. American industrial capacity exceeded German estimates by factors of 5 to 10. American agriculture produced surpluses that could support both civilian populations and military forces. American technology was more advanced, more reliable, and more efficiently manufactured. American workers were better fed, better educated, and more productive than their German counterparts. The Nazi racial theories that had justified the war made no sense in light of American achievements. The mongrel democracy had outproduced the master race. Jewish scientists had contributed to technological advances. Negro workers had built ships and planes. Immigrant communities had strengthened rather than weakened the nation. The diversity that Nazis claimed was weakness had instead created unmatched strength. Klaus Weber, the chemist, provided the most devastating analysis. American chemical plants used processes that German industry had invented but never efficiently implemented. American engineers had taken German discoveries and perfected them for mass production. The theoretical superiority that Nazis claimed for German science meant nothing if it could not be translated into practical advantage. American industrial democracy had proved more effective than German totalitarian control. Müller found himself questioning everything he had believed about the war. The Wehrmacht had not been defeated by superior enemy courage or numbers. They had been overwhelmed by an industrial avalanche that began rolling the moment America entered the conflict. German soldiers were brave, German weapons were excellent, German tactics were sophisticated. But none of these advantages could overcome enemy material superiority of such magnitude. The prisoners began receiving letters from families in Germany that confirmed their growing understanding. Cities were being bombed around the clock. Food was severely rationed. Coal was scarce. Consumer goods had disappeared. The war that was supposed to bring prosperity to Germany had instead brought destruction and privation. Meanwhile, American workers lived better during wartime than Germans had during peace. Obergefreiter Franz Kellner received word that his hometown of Bremen had been heavily bombed by American aircraft. The same B-24 Liberators he had watched rolling off assembly lines at Ford's Willow Run were now devastating German cities. The productive capacity he had witnessed firsthand was being turned against his homeland with systematic efficiency. The connection between American abundance and German destruction became terrifyingly clear. On October 20, 1943, The prisoners were assigned to work at aircraft modification centers where B-24 bombers received final equipment before deployment to combat theaters. Müller found himself installing radio equipment in planes that would soon be flying over Europe. The irony was not lost on him. German prisoners were contributing to the war effort that was destroying their homeland. The aircraft center employed 12,000 workers operating around the clock. B-24s arrived from Ford's Willow Run plant at the rate of 1 per hour, received modifications for specific combat roles, and departed for training bases or overseas deployment. The throughput exceeded anything in German industry. This single facility processed more aircraft monthly than the Luftwaffe produced in a year. American aircraft modification techniques demonstrated engineering sophistication that impressed even experienced Luftwaffe technicians among the prisoners. Standardized components allowed rapid equipment changes.
Precision manufacturing permite de exact tolerances.
Quality control procedures ensured reliability under combat conditions. The systematic approach to aircraft production exceeded German capabilities despite similar theoretical knowledge. Müller was assigned to work alongside American technicians installing radio equipment. The Americans used test procedures that verified every connection, measurement techniques that ensured precise calibration, and documentation systems that tracked every modification. The attention to detail exceeded German standards despite the pressure for rapid production. Quality was not sacrificed for quantity. Both were achieved through superior organization. The American workers displayed technical knowledge that challenged Nazi stereotypes about democratic education. High school graduates understood electronics. Women operated precision instruments. Immigrants contributed specialized skills. The educational system that produced this workforce was clearly superior to German technical training. Democratic schools had created more capable workers than authoritarian institutions. During lunch breaks, Steinbach listened to American workers discuss the war with confidence that reflected their knowledge of production statistics. They knew exactly how many planes were being built, how many ships were being launched, how much material was being shipped to Allied forces worldwide. The transparency that Nazis claimed would weaken America had instead created informed citizens who understood their contribution to victory. On November 3, 1943, Ford's Willow Run plant celebrated completion of its 1,000th B-24 bomber. The achievement was announced on radio broadcasts that prisoners were allowed to hear. 1,004-engine bombers in less than 2 years from a factory that had not existed when the war began. The number represented industrial capability beyond German comprehension. A single American plant had outproduced the entire German aircraft industry. The psychological impact on the prisoners was devastating. They had been raised believing in German industrial superiority and American weakness. The evidence contradicted everything they had been taught. American factories operated with efficiency that exceeded German standards. American workers achieved productivity that surpassed German efforts. American technology was more advanced than German engineering. The master race had been outmastered by the mongrel democracy. Dr. Brenner attempted to maintain group morale by emphasizing German cultural achievements and historical contributions to civilization. But such arguments rang hollow in the face of overwhelming American material success. Cultural superiority meant nothing if it could not produce practical advantages. Historical achievements were irrelevant if they did not translate into contemporary power. The Germans had built great cathedrals and composed magnificent music. The Americans were building the weapons that would win the war. Anton Weiss, the Bavarian farmer, provided the most honest assessment of their situation. German agriculture could not feed the German people without imports from occupied countries. American agriculture produced surpluses while supporting the largest military force in history. German industry required slave labor to maintain production. American industry achieved higher output using free workers who earned good wages. German science made theoretical advances that could not be practically implemented. American engineering turned scientific discoveries into mass-produced advantages. The comparison was not flattering to Germany. The authoritarian system that Nazis claimed was more efficient had been outperformed by democratic capitalism in every measurable category. The racial purity that was supposed to strengthen Germany had instead limited human resources. The state control that was intended to maximize production had instead created bureaucratic inefficiency. The propaganda that claimed American weakness had been revealed as self-deceptive fantasy. By December 1943, most prisoners at Camp Hearne had abandoned hope of German victory. The evidence of American industrial supremacy was too overwhelming to dismiss. The material advantages that supported Allied advances on every front originated in factories, shipyards, and farms they had witnessed firsthand. The arsenal of democracy was real, and it was crushing the 1,000-year Reich with systematic efficiency. The Christmas season provided the final blow to Nazi ideology. American organizations, churches, and civic groups sent 500,000 Christmas packages to German prisoners, enemies who had been trying to kill American soldiers months earlier. Each package contained cigarettes, candy, toiletries, and games. Local communities invited prisoners to Christmas dinners despite regulations preventing most from accepting. The Methodist Church Choir of Hearne performed Christmas carols in German for the prisoners. Women from the town sent homemade cookies and cakes. The Boy Scouts delivered handmade Christmas cards. This kindness toward enemies shattered the final remnants of Nazi racial theory. Müller received a Christmas card from a 12-year-old American girl named Sally who had drawn a Christmas tree and written "Peace on Earth" in careful German script. Her father was serving with the Pacific Fleet. Her brother had died at Anzio, yet she felt compassion for German prisoners. The generosity revealed strength that Nazis could never understand. Only a nation absolutely certain of victory and secure in its power could afford such humanity toward enemies. The Christmas feast itself defied comprehension. Turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, gravy, vegetables, pies, ice cream. Quantities of food that Germany had not seen since before the First World War. The prisoners ate until they were sick, unable to comprehend resources being lavished on enemies. They consumed better meals than German generals, better than party leaders, better than they had ever eaten as free men. If Americans could feed prisoners this way, what must their own soldiers eat? Obergefreiter Franz Kellner, whose brother had died in the bombing of Hamburg, wrote the most eloquent summary of their transformation. They knew the prisoners were enemies. Many had sons and husbands fighting against German armies. Yet they showed Christian charity, not propaganda, but genuine kindness. What kind of people treat enemies this way? Only those absolutely certain of victory and secure in their power. As 1944 began, over 25,000 German prisoners in camps across America had volunteered for democracy education courses. The transformation exceeded all expectations of the secret re-education program. Prisoners who had arrived as fanatical Nazis were writing essays about democratic reconstruction. Officers who had sworn oaths to Hitler were planning how to implement American agricultural methods in post-war Germany. The conversion was complete. Müller found himself enrolled in correspondence courses from the University of Chicago, studying economics and political science. The curriculum challenged everything he had believed about capitalism, democracy, and international relations. But the theoretical knowledge reinforced what he had observed firsthand. Democratic systems created conditions for maximum productivity. Free markets encouraged innovation and efficiency. Educated populations made better decisions than authoritarian bureaucrats. The spring 1944 harvest provided additional evidence of American agricultural supremacy. Working in the Rio Grande Valley, Müller witnessed mechanized farming that achieved yields impossible with European methods. American agricultural science had revolutionized food production through selective breeding, chemical fertilizers, and mechanical cultivation. The abundance that supported Allied armies worldwide was not accidental. It was the product of systematic scientific advancement. On June 6, 1944, news of the Normandy invasion reached Camp Hearne. The scale of the operation demonstrated American organizational capacity beyond Nazi Germany's wildest dreams. 6,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the first wave. The logistics achievement represented industrial and military coordination that exceeded German capabilities. The prisoners watched newsreels of the invasion within days, seeing endless streams of ships, artificial harbors, and supply systems that delivered 15,000 tons daily across open beaches. Heinrich Bauer provided the most devastating analysis of Operation Overlord. The artificial harbors alone represented engineering achievements beyond German capabilities. The landing craft were manufactured in quantities that exceeded the German Navy. The aircraft support was larger than the entire Luftwaffe. The logistics system was more sophisticated than anything German generals had ever imagined. They were watching their homeland being crushed by industrial power beyond their wildest nightmares. The prisoners who had initially mocked American claims about production capacity now understood they had challenged the most powerful industrial force in human history. The arsenal of democracy was not propaganda. It was mathematical reality. American factories produced more tanks than German industry had ever built. American shipyards launched more tonnage than the Kriegsmarine had ever commissioned. American aircraft plants manufactured more planes than the Luftwaffe had ever operated. The numbers were not lies. They were the foundation of Allied victory. Dr. Brenner organized a final discussion among the educated prisoners to assess their experience. The conclusion was unanimous. Nazi ideology had been based on false assumptions about American weakness and German strength. The evidence was overwhelming. American democracy had created conditions for maximum industrial productivity. American capitalism had encouraged innovation and efficiency. American education had produced more capable workers than German authoritarianism. American diversity had strengthened rather than weakened the nation. The racial theories that had justified the war made no sense in light of American achievements. The mongrel democracy had outproduced the master race in every category. Jewish scientists had contributed to technological advances. Negro workers had built ships and planes. Immigrant communities had strengthened American productivity. The diversity that Nazis claimed was weakness had instead created unmatched industrial power. As the war ended in May 1945, German prisoners faced repatriation with mixed emotions. They had witnessed an America that contradicted everything they had believed. They had eaten better as prisoners than as soldiers. They had been treated with more dignity by enemies than by their own government. They had seen industrial capacity that made German production appear primitive. They had experienced democratic prosperity that exposed Nazi promises as fantasies. Between 1945 and 1946, 371,683 German prisoners were repatriated from American camps. They returned to a Germany divided, destroyed, and destitute. But they brought with them something precious beyond measure. Knowledge of how a democratic industrial society functioned. Understanding of what free people could achieve when working together. Experience of abundance that could be recreated through proper organization and democratic governance. Many former prisoners rose to prominence in West Germany's reconstruction. They brought American methods to German industry, American efficiency to German agriculture, and American democratic ideals to German politics. The economic miracle of the 1950s was built partly on knowledge gained in American prison camps. The Germany that rose from the ashes was constructed on foundations laid by prisoners who had learned that prosperity came from freedom, not conquest. Hans Müller returned to Bavaria in 1946 as a changed man. He had entered captivity as a Nazi true believer and emerged as a Democrat. He had witnessed the arsenal of democracy at peak production and understood that Germany's defeat was inevitable from the moment America entered the war. He brought back knowledge of American agricultural methods that helped transform post-war German farming. More importantly, he brought back understanding of democratic values that helped rebuild German society. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary of the war's end, surviving German prisoners held a reunion in Austin, Texas. Over 500 former prisoners returned to America, many bringing their families to show them where their transformation had begun. Hans Müller, then 78 years old, spoke for many when he delivered the keynote address. We came to America as enemies, as Nazis, as believers in a lie. We left as friends, as Democrats, as men who had seen the truth. America showed us that strength comes not from conquest, but from production. Not from hatred, but from diversity. Not from tyranny, but from freedom. We witnessed the arsenal of democracy at full production. We saw farmers who produced food for the world, workers who built the tools of victory, and citizens who treated enemies with dignity. We learned that America's true weapon was not its bombs or tanks, but its inexhaustible capacity for creation and its unshakable confidence in human dignity. The transformation of German prisoners in America stands as testimony to a profound truth. The most powerful weapon in democracy's arsenal was not military might, but the simple, overwhelming evidence of what free societies could achieve. The prisoners had arrived believing in German superiority and American weakness. They left knowing the truth. American industrial might was not just overwhelming. It was incomprehensible to minds shaped by scarcity and tyranny. Their story proves that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through destruction but through demonstration. Not through propaganda but through prosperity. Not through hatred but through humanity. The German soldiers who witnessed American industrial might became unwitting ambassadors of democracy, carrying back to their homeland the seeds of transformation that would bloom into one of history's most successful reconstructions. In the end, America's secret weapon was exactly what the prisoners had initially mocked. The wasteful abundance that seemed inefficient was actually the product of unmatched productivity. The casual prosperity that appeared soft was actually the foundation of unbreakable strength. The democratic chaos that looked weak was actually the source of unlimited power. The German prisoners had mocked America's industrial capacity as propaganda and waste. They discovered instead that they had challenged the greatest productive force in human history. The arsenal of democracy was real, and it was magnificent.